Hey guys, it's Robin, RS Island Crafts, and welcome to my craft room. As you can see, I'm trying a different setup here for our little embroidery project. We are working on the Floral Heart embroidery pattern that's meant for a 6-inch hoop. Designed by cutesy-crafts.com. Miss Jessica Anderson from this year. Last week we did this little leaf here. We did the lazy daisies and we did the stem stitch. I went ahead and I just made a couple more and just filled those in. I did 2 of one color and then I switched to a different color, made them just a little bit darker and lighter, and just changed it up a little so that it kind of varies the green. I didn't want to have them all be in the same green color. Today I thought I'd go ahead and do this little lazy daisy flower just because, I mean, we did it over here and it's fine, but maybe you want to see how they go all together into the center. And then afterwards we're going to do a little satin stitch on this flower here. So I'm going to go ahead and start us off with this lazy daisy. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come up in the center. And the floss I chose for this one is 600. It's kind of a maybe a mauvey pink color. And just like we did with the lazy daisy last week, after going through the center, I'm just going to go kind of next to it. I'm using 6 strands, so it kind of takes a little bit sometimes to pull it through. I'm going to go up to the tip. And I'm just going to pull it through, and I'm going to secure my little petal. I'm not pulling it too tight, but I don't want to leave it too loose either. And then I'm just going to go ahead and repeat that. Now since I went down in this section, maybe I'll come over to this flower and I'll come up over here. That way there's no chance of me going up in the same hole that I'd already gone down. I'm going to use this same floss color when I go ahead and I do my flower over there because I thought it was a really nice flower color, but I wanted to use it in a second place so it's not just the one. That way I have a little bit of a continuity going all the way across. So now I'm going to go back to this flower because once again, like I said, I won't come up into the same holes. And I'm just going to keep doing my petals all the way across. Sometimes you need to fluff your floss up a little bit if one of the strands decides it doesn't want to lay where it's supposed to. They have special laying tools. They're kind of like a stiletto when you're sewing, just that the thing with almost like an ice pick. It just lets you run it underneath the floss. You would take it like this, and you just kind of run it under your floss to make sure that they're all laying nice and evenly. Remember how close you put your start and your stops here is what's going to determine how wide your petal is. I guess you really don't have to worry about going up and down in the same hole because we are putting a tacking stitch in. So the beginning in these 2 spots that I just did here, as long as they're not in the same hole, you're going to be fine. And that's it. And now if you didn't like the way that this looked, like say maybe you didn't like quite the way that the hole right here looked, you can just go ahead and put a French knot in the center if you'd like. or you can add a bead, a button, a different color, or just leave it all the same and just let that hole be there. And there you go. I'm going to go ahead and end this thread off, and then we'll go ahead and work over here, because I do not want to take my floss from here all the way over to here, because that would be way too far and the red would definitely show underneath there. I have our little test hoop out. I have my cream floss all ready to go. And I went ahead and I just did my little basic design, because it's going to be almost similar. These are a little rounder, this is a little longer. But I'm going to go ahead and show you on this one. And this is the way that most of these people that are making these patterns do their satin stitch. Then I'm going to show you the way that I was taught how to do it. So we have our loop, and I came out on the outside of my line drawing. And I'm just going to go ahead and take my needle and I'm going to put it on the outside there. Now our pattern calls for 3 strands of embroidery floss. I have all 6 in. The thing with satin stitch is a lot of the times it depends on the size of it. The larger the design that you're trying to fill in, the space you're trying to fill in, the more strands you're probably going to want. If you want a nice even and smooth look, then if you go down to about 2 or 3 strands, then you're going to have a nice smooth filling it in. Now of course it's going to take longer to do, but in the end you're going to have a little bit nicer satin stitch area that you filled in. Now this is definitely, hand embroidery is a slow process. It's not meant to be rushed. It's meant to be relaxing and enjoying. So I try to, depending on, like I said, the design, I will go down to 3 strands. But I have 6 here for us to learn. Now we have to fill this whole area in, and I decided to go straight up the center, because when you're filling these in, it's easy to determine where it is from here to here, but as you're going this way, if we were to start, well, where would I put my first stitch? Would I put it up here, or would I go down here? You know, how much of this edge is going to be showing? You're not really going to know. So what I do is I go up through the center, and I'll fill in one side, and then I'll go onto the other side of the center mark, and I'll fill that side. So I'll work from the center out. I just put my second stitch in close to the first, and I try to stay on the outside of my line. And then go down to the outside. Now I went ahead and bought myself a nice little desk lamp, and I hope that's given us a nice little amount of light so that we can see what's going on. It's kind of hard for me to tell. There's like shadows everywhere. It's what happens when we get into more of the winter, I guess. But I'll try to keep my hand shadows out of the way. So then I'm just going to keep following through, and each line is going to get a little bit shorter. And if I find that I left too much of a hole, I could always add another one in there. But I wouldn't want to do it until after I filled them all in, because as you're filling them in, it's going to kind of squish your stitches together. So when you're putting them through, you just want to try to get right next to the one that was before it. We're just going to follow the lines. So like I said, our lines are going to get a little bit shorter each time. We can just hold it straight up, and it'll show us where the next one goes, even though we can obviously see based on our drawing. Now this is what I was saying in the beginning. You don't really know exactly where your last stitch is going to be. So it'd be really hard to determine where to start. Now we're just doing this kind of, you know, I'm sitting in my chair and watching, talking to you, doing it through the camera and all. See how these are kind of chunky looking? We have a little bit of spaces here. If I'd have taken a little bit more time and I'd dropped down to my 3 strands instead of 6, I'd been able to snug them up really nice and tight and get this to fill in nicely. Since you can see just that these are like rope, it's really thick and chunky, and it just lays down so much nicer when you go ahead and drop down to just a few strands of your floss. Now this ends up being a padded stitch, because as you can see from the back here, I'm going all the way across, so I'm adding extra stitches on And this is going to go ahead and give this a little bit of padding. Now if we wanted it to puff up even more, we can draw some stitches across, and then, like if we do east and west and then we do north and south on top of it, it would make this puff up even more. So if you needed something that stuck up a lot more, and you kind of wanted more of a bubble look, you can add some stitches underneath. But there's your basic satin stitch. It just kind of fills in the space. But I want to show you the way that I was taught to do them. Like if you want to have a nice round circle, this way is not too bad. You can kind of see the jagged edges. If you want a nice round circle, the way I was taught is you do basically a back stitch around the circle. And we're just going to fill this line in. I know we haven't done a back stitch yet. But what a back stitch is basically doing is you're going backwards. So I'm going to go forward a stitch length, and then I'm going to come back to the last stitch I did, and that's a back stitch. And I'm just going to draw all the way around my little circle here. I know it's not a perfect circle, I just kind of sketched it out real quick. And I'll show you what this does in a second. This is going to help me define my little circle here and make sure that I know exactly where I'm going. It makes all my stitches nice and smooth on here. It's also going to make it puff up just a little bit more than this one did. I know this takes a little extra time, but it all depends on what you're looking for. You can do this in, just maybe do it in 3 of your strands. I have 6 in here because it's easier to see, and that's going to make it nice and thick and puffy. That's one of the fun things with embroidery. You can change it to however you need it to be. Do a couple little stitches to fill in this area. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing that we did with this one, except now we have a guideline to do our stitches by. I'm going to come up on the outside of my stitches. I'm going to take it straight across, and I'm going to go down on the outside of those stitches. And that's just going to give me a nice area. Because sometimes when you fill these in, sometimes people, when you have a circle, they feel the need to stitch around it to make that edge nice and neat. But when you do that, it doesn't really work that well. It tends to make it look even more jagged. And once again, you can see that I have some gaps because it's not as easy as you think to be looking through the camera while you're stitching. But I can go back through over here and add another one in to fill in that little spot that you could see. Okay, so that gives me a nice rounded edge there. I don't have stitches that stick out here and go in there because I'm going right along the edge and I know exactly where this line is. And when I'm following a line like this, maybe I don't always get it exactly afterwards. Sometimes I go a little long and a little short. But this way I know that I need to put my needle down right up against those threads there. So then I know I'm going to have a nice rounded circle if I started with a nice rounded circle. And then everything will lay nice and flat. And with these stitches here, it'll hold it up a little bit, so this is to be just a little bit puffier. So let's go work on our actual project. Now I'm going to go ahead and work on these. I'm going to leave this center alone because I'm going to put some French knots in the center. And I'm just going to go ahead and do some satin stitches along here. Since I'm right here, I went ahead and took my thread and I anchored it underneath this green viney leaf thing here. That way I don't have to worry about holding it down. Like I told you in the beginning, when you had to hold it the very first time and stitch over it to keep it from pulling out. Once you get started, it doesn't matter that I'm using a red thread and I'm anchoring it underneath green. It is so close that you're not going to see it. So I'm going to come up right along my circle there. I'm going to lay my floss down, because if I go like this, it's going to be at a little bit of an angle. But I can hold it straight up and decide where the straightest line is going to be. If I just move it around a little. So I like it right there. And just drop it down. Now we'll see what it looks like when we're just using the 3 strands of floss, and I'm actually getting my face right in here and paying attention to what I'm doing so that it looks really nice in the end. Now 6 strands of course would make this puff up just a little bit more. But I think I'd rather go for a nice smooth look versus having it stick up, because I'm going to have a lot of other areas that are going to be nice and 3D. Now with this petal, I could decide to just start like following it over, but I want all my lines to go straight from the center, or as close to straight as I can be. So I'll just drop down a little bit in the center, and I'll make my lines just a little bit longer when I get to certain areas. Like I'm going to be down here longer, but I'm going to be shorter up there. So it's just basically following the shape. It's coloring with floss. I can go wild and crazy and make my petals all different colors or different shades of red. Now the way this is, because you see how this is the full petal and this is a part petal that comes here. So this petal is actually underneath this one. So I'm going to continue stitching this one and cover right over where I think that other one might be. So yeah, you can do it all different colors, or you can just do different colors of red. Or you can just stick with the same floss and make all your petals the same. It's your garden. You get to design your flowers. Now I know not many of you are actually making this design right along with me, but these designs are going to transfer because it's the same stitches. It can transfer to any project you're working on. These little designs are just nice samplers because you have so many different stitches. And like I said the other day, you have plenty of places to practice them. Maybe one little last stitch here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this out of the hoop and see if we can see it a little bit better. Or out of the stand, I should say. So there you go. There's that one petal that is a satin stitch. I'm going to go ahead and finish off of the rest of those petals. And I'll probably work on a couple other of the flowers that there are. We have these little circles right here that are going to be done the same way, satin stitch, and with the French knots in the center. I'll go ahead and add the French knots to my little flower here after I go ahead and get all the petals done. So that's a satin stitch. I showed you a couple different ways to outline it. You just want to make sure everything is lined up nice and neat, and that you go ahead and lay everything flat, and your petals are going to look nice. Plus, when you get from a distance, you know, it's not like you're zoomed right in all the time, right? It's going to look really nice. And these are very, very busy, so if you have any little oops, there's so many other things to look at on these hoops that you're not going to notice that. Alright guys, thanks for hanging out with me in the craft room this week. I'll see you next time. Bye.